Hello, welcome to the Always Be Comedy podcast. Our guest today is one of the all-time greats in the history of British comedy. Tim, it's Ben Elton.
An iconic figure, one of the biggest names of alternative comedy, full stop, really. But at one stage, possibly the biggest comedian in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just finished the audiobook of his new autobiography. Ben Elton, What Have I Done? It's a great cover. Tim, you know we love the big old fonts on our posters.
Oh, yeah.
You may have seen it. I mean, we'll certainly be sharing the bejesus out of it.
Oh, yeah.
The cover is Ben Elton, big bright green letters, big bold, him on the front. What have I done? Big white letters. Very impactful cover. Sorry, I do bloody love a good poster and a good cover. Tim, there is one. So I did. You know, we do these blogs, and I did a 2-part blog on the greatest books about comedy. But this is more because you might be thinking. Well, I've been thinking, do I need to tweak the blog to add Ben Elton's? This is more out and out autobiography, and I mean, I read a lot of books. You know, hey, we all do. This is one of the best autobiographies I've ever read. It's right, the audiobook. Sorry, and I've said this before with comedians. I always think you've got to do the audiobook because they're obviously going to perform the heck out of it, and this is no exception. This is 15 hours long. Bearing in mind, Tim and I do Always Be Comedy and everything that entails. I've got 2 kids, on and on and on and on. Tim, I don't see how I could have read this book any quicker.
But yeah, I'm very, very impressed you managed to marathon 15 hours with all that's going on. That's brilliant.
I swear to God, this is true. This is like the ultimate advertisement for the book. Tim, I promise this is true. I've been taking my phone into the shower and listening to the book while I'm in the shower.
That's good. That's really good.
That's how addicted I got to this book. There was one night where my youngest couldn't get to sleep, so I was laying in bed with my youngest, with my earbuds in, listening to the book. So basically, any spare nanosecond I've had has been spent listening to this book. It is, all right, I know I've done the audiobook, but it is an absolute page turner. It's fascinating. Ben Elton has achieved so many things that I'd completely forgotten about. And one of the things I love about this book is that he covers things that, say, didn't last beyond a first or a second series, but he covers them as extensively as some of the mega hits. And that says a lot because he does directly say this. He loves the shows that didn't quite get the love they might have done, or the movies and so on, as much as he does, say, your Blackadders, your Thin Blue Lines, your Upstart Crows, your Young Ones, and so on. Also, Tim, I've got a confession. I've never read a Ben Elton novel, and that will 100% now change. He's had something like 16 books out, virtually all of them bestsellers, and often globally so. This is a man, a very honest man. It's such an honest book. But he's had so many hits, and also he's had hits in the positive sense, and he's taken some awful hits in the negative sense. And the book reminds you of some of the unnecessary shoeings the guy has taken. You know what? I won't spoil it because more than once, what was a critical panning would then turn into a huge commercial success. I adored this book. I adore Ben Elton, and I've loved Ben Elton for many years. I've interviewed him a couple of times down the years, and so I've been very lucky to be able to, and I've said this before on this podcast, if you get the chance to tell someone that you love them, you've got to take it with both hands. Tim, wasn't he just on the most scintillating form?
He was on great form. We were meant to have an hour with him, but there's so much to talk about. As you'll see, if you look for runtime, we get into a lot more. He was very generous with his time. We're very grateful.
I mean, Tim, this is one of those I could have.
Yeah.
Whether Ben likes it or not, you and I, we could have sat there for 7 hours, couldn't we? There's just so much to talk about. But we do. I mean, Tim, I think we can safely say we really got hold of this one, and we talked about. There's so much that we got through. I mean, this was This was an honour and a privilege, and as I say, he was on amazing form. I cannot recommend this. You can really tell that I'm speaking with my heart and my soul. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's just my personal preference. Is the audiobook with a comedian. You obviously do whatever you want to do, but we know that you're comedy fans, guys. Get your do yourself a favour. Get this book. There are some twists. There are some turns. There's so much that. I mean, look, I thought I was quite the anorak with Ben Elton. There's so much in this that I simply did not know, and it's a treat. And Tim, I mean, this episode is a treat, and he's on great form. And Tim, hopefully, I mean, I've said this to Ben a couple of times down the years when I've interviewed him in the past. The dream would be to get Ben at Always Be Comedy. So, fingers crossed and all that.
Fingers crossed. And look, I don't say anything. I felt like it felt achievable after our chat.
Yes, beautifully put. As I say, we hope Ben will grace us with his presence in the future. But Tim, in the meantime, this comes out Tuesday the 28th of October. Tim, tomorrow, last few tickets, Henry Packer, Work in Progress.
Yeah, one off. Look, it's been a big old loving of an intro. But Henry Packer's show is really brilliant. He's doing something completely different, sort of mixes live animation and really brilliant stand-up. If you've ever listened to the Free Bean Salad podcast, you know how funny he is. He is unbelievable.
The Chelsea night's the second ever Chelsea night this Thursday. Timo, Sophie Duker, Ivo Graham, Glenn Moore. We may even add someone else. Last few tickets there. And then this Thursday at the Tommyfield, Tim, Ian Smith, Pravanya Pillay, and a certain mystery guest.
Absolutely superb. Yes, we're now in our phase where on Thursdays we're going to be running two shows not in back to back, concurrently in different parts of London. It's very, very exciting.
Tim, these are exciting times.
These are very exciting times. Yes, I can't wait to get stuck in. And at the time of recording, we're getting stuck in a matter of hours.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Wednesday, the 5th of November, Bridget Christie preview ahead of her Jacket's Potato Pizza tour. Tim, there are few acts who are as beloved at Always Be Comedy as Bridget Christie. It's rarefied air.
Yeah, she had a show with us just a couple of nights ago, and it was so much fun. The vibes were electric. It was just really warm, great stuff. She was doing something slightly different to previous she had done with us before, and it was a joy to behold.
Now, I wasn't there, Tim, but it was borderline. People were almost taking their cigarette lighters out and holding them in the air.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I was one of them.
Tim, I mean, oh my lordy. Sorry, we're really dwelling on upcoming shows here, but I've only just seen this. Well, not I've only just seen it, but anyway. Thursday, the 6th of November, Tommyfield, Jin Hao Lee, not very special guest, don't know who that is, Rosie Hall, Emma Maguire, and then concurrently, you're right, Tim, in Chelsea, Joel Dommett, mystery guest, Ian Sterling, Salia AB. I mean, Tim, what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. Yeah, it's scintillating stuff. It's very exciting.
For all these and many, many more, and we're adding shows to 2026 all the time, please do visit alwaysbecomedy.com/tickets. And then also there's the designated Chelsea section, which is alwaysbecomedy.com/Chelsea. And then there's also the blog, Tim, alwaysbecomedy.com/blog. Tim, I think the blog that will have come out yesterday, my plan is to make it all about Ben Elton, like a real flag waver.
Oh, lovely. Great. Well then, guys, look forward to that.
I put quite a bit of pressure on myself to do that, because now that I've said it, I've sort of got to make it about that, haven't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting stuff.
But having just done 15 hours on an audiobook, I am well equipped to do this. Right. Anyway, you know what? Here he is, an icon of comedy. Do you know what? For our younger listeners, you're going to love this. But for the people who are already on board, the Ben Elton fans, if you already love Ben Elton, get ready to love this guy even more. Here he is, one of the all-time greats of comedy, the maestro, Ben Elton. It's not on my list of questions, but to take us straight into it, because I was looking on the socials. I take it there's not even a fibre of your being that's tempted to go on social media.
Oh God, there's many fibres. I'm constantly, my fibres are twanging. I'm constantly tempted for the one obvious reason that in a world where old media is shrinking daily, I come from a generation where if you did a gig in London and you put one advert in the Evening Standard, that was it. Everybody knew. I mean, didn't mean they bought a ticket, but they sure knew about it. The job was done. A little bit of fly posting maybe, but basically local press, advert on the radio, job done. Now, of course, we all know that, there is no Evening Standard. Well, there's this weird weekly thing. So, and of course, artists now curate a following, and everyone's a bit siloed, and they have their following, and they try and build it. And it would be wonderful. I mean, gosh, I'd love to have Stephen. I think he's off X or whatever it is now, but he used to have millions of followers, and that meant he could tell them when he had a book out or a show on. And God, I would love that. But the price to be paid, I always knew was too high. I always knew engagement. I spent my life dodging trolls and hecklers. And the idea of putting easy access to them in my pocket, meaning every time I put my phone on, somebody could be having a go at me. And leaving aside the negative side of just how much hatred there is out there. Also the endless engagement. I mean, I know that I can't help it. When people stop me in the street and say, do you actually mean what you said about, I saw you when the miners benefit? And I can't help but engage. And I'll spend 15 minutes having a chat with them. And I know that would be the case if I was looking at that sort of thing online. So for my own sanity, I knew immediately, I never even started with it. I have regrets because it is the modern world, but I know it was the right decision for me. And I'm still there's just enough old media to sort of see me out. I mean, I've done everything. I was on GMB this morning. I was on Lorraine yesterday. I'm still grateful they'll have me on. And, that'll hopefully get the word out there. Mainly, this is common. Obviously, that's what I really need.
Is there not I'm trying not to sound like your agent here, but we've seen greats of the game go on social media, start with zero, and they're paying someone to access the archives, put on old clips. I mean, you would be spoilt for choice. And we've seen them amass hundreds of thousands of followers, so that when the tour comes around, they could. Is there not and also turn off notifications? I mean, I went on Good Morning Britain once for a segment about being bald. It was very light-hearted. The amount of even my own phone went, dude, turn off notifications, which I've done. It's been a game changer. Can you not do that? And then you don't engage.
Do you know what? You're making a great. I have thought, gosh, Jimmy Carr said to me, he said, you need to cut this up into 2-minute bites and get it on TikTok. And I don't know what TikTok. I mean, it sounds pathetic, but I mean, I sort of know what TikTok is, but I don't really know what TikTok. But obviously, I do understand that were I to sort of spend half an hour with a social media person, they could explain everything, sort it out, and if necessarily do it for me. I think the reason I've sort of shied away from that is because as a dedicated writer and communicator all my life, I've always stood in my truth, as young people would say. And the idea of offering access to me, but that it actually being really access to somebody who worked for me is so sort of alien to what I am on stage and what I am as a comic writer. If there's one thing I can offer, it's honesty and integrity. I mean, people don't always like what I say, and sometimes I look back and wish I hadn't said it occasionally. But nonetheless, it was all true at the time, and I meant it. But having said that, bearing in mind, you're not really talking about curating a sort of Instagram page where I say, hey, I'm in, so-and-so today, feeling great. If I were to do that, I would have to do it myself. I could not sleep at night if I had someone, no matter how lovely, saying, I'll just pop a little thing saying you loved eating at so-and-so's today. I could not do that. But what I could do is what you've suggested, and I've got to get around to it. I mean, I've had 40 years of stand-up, and we could probably throw a few bits and pieces of sketch work and clips up there, and it might make a really good, what would it be, an Instagram page or a YouTube channel? What would it be?
I'd say all three of the things we've mentioned there. I'd say TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. I mean, we see, Jack D, friend of Always Be Comedy, we see I love Jack. I'm not sure it's Jack putting the clips up, and I say that with love in
But
my
that's
heart.
all right. No, that's okay.
But that's what I'm suggesting. That's what Tim does our clip. I'm not putting my, So if I'm not putting my clips up, Ben. But it is now. We're doing this October 2025. Let's pluck one from the hat. Double seat. Holds up now. I defy anyone who's seen that routine to not get on a train or a bus or what have you, and that is not playing on the screen on their mind. So much of your stuff is so timeless.
Well, I did the men menstruated routine on my last stand-up tour, but the one I did in 2019, to give an example of how the world is changing and how, now clearly, we live in a world where there's an idea that men can menstruate if they're trans men. And that sort of thing was interesting. So a lot of material still stands up, and it's also, not only does it stand up, but it also kind of provokes a new conversation, because I've always delved into what's happening in society. Not even rarely party political. I did a lot of thatch stuff on the topical bits of Saturday Night Live, but in my stand-up routines, my tours, it generally was always a much more general social, motivated by a certain position, a liberal left position, but not specific to any particular party or policy. I honestly think it could work. Maybe after we've done this ABC, you can send me a couple of names that I might talk to about it, because it is silly that all that material is there. And I wouldn't mind somebody curating that. And I would then perhaps drop in and say, oh, this was fun. I remember why I did that. I suppose I've just been overwhelmed by the technology. I've only just got my credit card on my phone, and I'm like the last person to discover how amazing it is to just do that.
I'm the same. I'm new to that. I'm still getting the card out on the bus.
Yeah, me too.
Ben, honestly, if I'm doing that at the cinema, I'm like, oh my, am I living in Tron?
I know, exactly. I'm still sort of excited about it, and although unexcited about so much else about it, obviously. But so look, okay, good advice, and I really should do it. Yeah, somebody maybe, Phil McIntyre's office has looked after me for 40 years. Frankly, they should be doing it. I'll have a word.
They could. Phil Mac is a great shout, and even when when it's Christmas, say you're sharing a clip from Blackadder's Christmas Carol or something. Stephen Merchant does a great job, and it's things like 12 years ago today, this episode of X came out, and it's a little clip from whatever it might be.
Can you get a right? What about if you put out something from Blackadder's Christmas Carol? I don't own the rights. If you wanted to put that on a clip show, you'd have to negotiate with them.
I think we've heard from like pretty big names. I think you just stick it out there, and if there's a problem, there's a problem.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to think about that.
I'm excited on your behalf.
If you could send me an idea about who the sort of people that could do that could be good.
I'll tell you what, Ben, there's a bit in the book. Now, my wildest dream would be to score a goal for Crystal Palace, right? And then there's a bit in the book, you perform, your wife is on bass, Ringo Starr is on the drums, and George Harrison is on the guitar. And I think Ben's reality has exceeded my actual wildest dream. Now, please tell me you were able to enjoy that as a moment.
Oh, yes. And I've enjoyed the memory ever since. I talk a lot about friendships in the book, and I have made some really wonderful friendships over my life, all of which I've sustained. Obviously, George died many years ago now, but we were friends. And actually, I met him through Rick. I owe a lot of parts of my life are entwined with Rick's, which is why he's sort of so central to the first half of the book. And we loved our rock and roll, and we'd always play early rock and roll. This is in the 80s. We'd get in the van. When Rick and I toured together in the 80s, just the two of us, we'd always play Little Richard afterwards, and we just loved it. And we loved. And one time Rick rang me up and said, Farty, get in a cab now. We used to get celeb invites to things. I don't get them anymore, but when we were here, and I hadn't been invited, but he'd been invited to the Hard Rock Cafe's 25th anniversary. This is in 91 or something. And Rick said we wouldn't normally go to something like that. But he said Carl Perkins is going to play at the Hard Rock. And Carl Perkins, as some of your listeners, watchers will know, wrote Blue Suede Shoes, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, the original Millionaire Quartet. Johnny Cash, Elvis, Jerry Lee, and Carl Perkins. Yeah. Anyway, so we went down. We can't believe we're going to see Carl Perkins, and we walked in. And there was George Harrison sitting in with him playing lead guitar. So already we're in heaven, right? At the Hard Rock. And Rick had to go. He had young kids then. I didn't. Sophie was in Australia. So I hung around. And I'm at the bar. And there's this kerfuffle. Everyone's kerfuffling. And suddenly George Harrison emerges from the throng. He'd sought me out. And he said, first words he said, I promise you I'll never forget it. He said, thanks for keeping us amused in the 1980s. And it just, and we became friends, and we saw, you know, something of him and Olivia, beautiful Olivia Harrison, who I still correspond with now, and we met Paul and Linda through them, became friends. It was, and for me, because for me the Beatles, like for many people, you're not just the greatest entertainers of the 20th century, but the greatest art. I mean, their cultural, political, social, creative impact is. And their contributions to sum of human happiness is possibly incomparable, you know. Anyway, I love the Beatles. And one time we were at a party at Friar Park, and George was there, and we'd been invited, and it was lovely. And George Harrison came up and said, come upstairs to the studio. I want to have a ciggy, and I don't want to do it in front of my auntie. So I'm turning Manchester. I've turned Oasis. Well, let's face it, they turned Beatles. So anyway, so we crept upstairs. This wasn't a joint or anything. He didn't want to have an ordinary cigarette in front of his auntie. This is George Harrison. And we get up there, and there's the studio. And George says, come on, Sophie, pick up the bass. And he starts strumming, and Sophie picks up the bass. And George said, you know all the songs, Ben, what do you want to sing? And I sang I Saw Her Standing There, a Paul McCartney song. Maybe I should have done a George one, but they're a bit thing. I don't think I could have done Here Comes the Sun. Anyway, suddenly Ringo turns up and says, oh, this is where the party's happening. And anyway, for 2 numbers, we did I Saw Her Standing There, and then we did All Shook Up, Elvis's classic. And that was obviously one of the genuinely crowning moments of my life, and Sophie's. She feels exactly the same. She's a professional bass player. And at the end of it, I said to Ringo, and I don't want to fanboy you, it's ridiculous, I know, but when I tell my kids that I jammed with Ringo Starr, nothing is ever going to be the same again. And he said, don't worry, Ben, I'm going to ring mine and say I jammed with Ben Elton. And obviously, it was a wry comment. He knows he's a Beatle, and he knows I'm a farty little comic in Britain. But it was incredible, incredible. Apologies for the Liverpool accents, anybody out there. I know they're not Liverpool accents.
No, I mean, through the book, the voices, the way you bring the voices to life. I mean, you must have heard this before. You are a gifted mimic.
I can do it a bit, yeah. I mean, in the audio version, people have said it's quite. I can, yeah. I'm actually not such a bad actor. I always put myself down as an actor because I don't have any heart as an actor. I don't think the truth that I pursue sort of so voraciously in my writing, or maybe the personal truth, the inner truth, I don't think I have any ability to show that in acting. I think what I do is, I mean, I had an acting job. Ken Branagh gave me a part as a clown in Much Ado About Nothing in 1992, and he only gave me one direction. It was a very salutary moment. I think you'll be aware it was a very starry cast: Keanu Reeves, Denzel Washington, Michael Keaton, Emma Thompson, Richard Price. And we were doing this group scene where the Masters of the Watch, me and Michael Keaton, meet the posh people. And Ken took a take, and he said, called a halt, rushed in to give notes, and he, whispered conversation with Denzel, and then he went over to Emma and had a whisper, and with marvelous truths clearly being exchanged in whispered privacy. And as he was walking back at the camera, he just pointed at me and said, "Don't act." And of course, what I was doing was I was overacting, and I was trying, and I find it very hard to be truthful in acting, which is why I don't do it much. But I'm not a bad mimic, which is really just sort of copying, yeah.
I think that truth you talk about, but there's a line from Bill Hicks, and it's something like, play. He talks to musicians, play from your heart, play from your heart. And I just think that's your USP, Ben. You've always had that. You've always had that truth. When you speak, it comes from the depth of your soul. Bill Shankly used to talk about natural enthusiasm. And Ben, that's what you've got. Where does that come from, Ben?
I've always been Mickey Rooney. I mean, some of your listeners will know who I'm talking to, massive star in the 30s and 40s. But he famously did shows with Judy Garland, and they were always kind of, hey, let's do a show right here. We can do it. We'll do the show right here. And that's always been me. When I was 14, putting on plays with my fellow students and kids at school, which I wrote, and it's me to this day. I'm still just a great enthusiast for being alive and for expressing that enthusiasm. Sometimes it's outrage. It's never, well, occasionally it's fury. But, you know, I had this thing about being an angry young man or whatever, but it was always passion. It was never anger. There was some anger in it, but it was motivated by a love of community and a love of being part of this mad thing, you know, being human, being all together. And as comedians, we understand that best because it's our living. When you are in a theater and you hear a laugh, it's a moment of communal understanding when your imagination is engaged with the imagination of all those individuals in the audience, and we find a sense of community in all seeing the same madness in the same moment. I'm talking about proper comedy, not comedy which sort of massages prejudice or something, where you can get a large group of people to involuntarily laugh if you know, in the older, you know, the obvious one would Irish people are stupid, a complete myth, obviously. But, you know, there was a sort of almost Pavlovian reaction. Do a joke about stupidity, but you tie it on a certain group or whatever. But honest comedy, when you're doing something that's come from your heart and you get the laughter back from 100 or 1,000 hearts in the audience, it's something that is incomparable. And it's a celebration of community, which is what me, with my welfare state, Clement Attlee politics, have always felt, you know, very, very, very strongly about. So I guess that's where the enthusiasm comes from, a love of being part of a community, of being part of the world I live in.
I wondered if that was why, you know, say if you take Saturday Live, you talk about it so beautifully in the book, and it's almost like that invisible hand of all the people on that show. That invisible hand came down, picked you up like one of those toy machines, and you know, you guy. And I just wonder if it was that authenticity that people loved, because that was the true star maker. That's where you'd gone from Ben Elton, yeah, Young Ones, and so on and so forth. But then you became famous, didn't you?
Overnight. I mean, in those days, that's what happened. There were 4 channels by then. There'd only been 3 a couple of years before.
Yeah.
And you know, if you were on the telly, there was a guarantee that millions of people would see you. And if you were kind of on a hip show, then even if they didn't see you, they very quickly heard about you because you provoked comment in what was an incredibly small world of media, a few newspapers, a few radio channels. And so, yeah, I mean, literally, I was already a very successful writer. I'd already done the Young Ones and was well into the Blackadder by 1986 when I first performed on Saturday Live. But everything changed overnight when sparkly suited thatch bashing Ben emerged. And despite the fact that even on those first routines, I was doing lots of, you know, observation comedy, which I think was original and relatively groundbreaking for British stand-up in those days, because British stand-up was very much a kind of craft of joke telling in the 50s, 60s and 70s. And this idea of stand-up as a medium for ideas was relatively unformed and rare. Not saying I was the only one, but I think I might have been the first to really do it on telly. But funnily enough, obviously, the Thatch bit was what caught the headlines. But from that moment on, I defined myself. It was looking back, writing the autobiography, it's been really rather wonderful to unpack, as young people say, these moments. Everything I did from that night onwards was viewed through the prism of me as a stand-up comedian. On one night, having already achieved my absolute ambition, which was to be a writer of comedy, and I'd only ever become a stand-up as an accidental, you know, it was just something to earn a living, get my wares around. It was never an ambition of mine to perform in any sense, let alone be a stand-up. And yet, in that one night, I became more of a stand-up than anything else. And even many years later, I'd write my 12th, 13th, 14th novel, and it would still be sparkly suited thatch bashing Ben writes a novel as opposed to novelist occasionally does a stand-up tour. But look, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to work out through your life, work out why I got viewed the way I did, why I copped as much shit as I did. Did I deserve it? Yes, probably sometimes. Did I deserve all of it? Definitely not. And a lot of it emanates from that first moment when I became famous. 1 second I wasn't famous, 6.5 minutes later I was. And that's how it was in those days. And I got proper famous. I mean, because I was sort of notorious as well. But this is in the 80s. I mean, it's a long time ago.
there's a bit where you talk about the one and only gig in America, and look, if I knew you better, I'd put an arm around you and I'd go, even now, go back out there, do it again. Are you not tempted to give it another crack?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I'd get through customs anymore. I mean, one of the small comforts of being one of the numerous people who never made it in America is that it's not so attractive anymore. I mean, America is no longer, quite as lovely to look at. I mean, it remains the engine of popular culture. And of course, all the money's there and most of the decisions are made there. All the big production companies are American. I never tried very hard. I've got to be honest. Anyone who says they wouldn't have liked to make it in America is lying. Any comic who says, I never wanted to do it. No, everyone would love it. But you have got to go for it. And I fell in love with an Australian girl at the height of my British fame. And from then on, for the rest of my life, I was commuting to Australia. And that really takes a lot of time out of your life. So and also I was doing so well in Britain. There wasn't quite such an incentive. But I've had a few chances. And a couple I wish had made it once. The story of when I was captured by Shrek and DreamWorks and my encounter with Jeffrey Katzenberg, which I think is a genuinely weird and interesting showbiz movie story that a lot of people could well learn from, because it was one of the times I actually made the right decision about not trying to make it. I was offered my own DreamWorks movie, but the price tag that came with it would have been far too high for me to pay. And I was mature enough by the time that offer came to make that decision. Had it been 20 years before, I would have just grabbed it, and who knows where I'd have been. Maybe it would have been the right thing to do. I don't think it would have been. But if you want to make it in America, you got to go over and work it. I mean, either you get lucky, like say Ricky and Stephen, who created a work of true greatness in Britain, and that got picked up, and that was a straight transformation. They were huge in America. Or more likely, you put the years in, like Eddie Izzard did. I'll never forget. I met Eddie, or Susie, as we now call him. Susie was I'll call him Eddie because it was Eddie when I met him.
Yep.
We were both gigging Birmingham in the late 80s. He was just exploding. And he told me his plan. He said, I'm going to crack America. And the way to do it is you go over, you play colleges, you ask for very little fee, you play a few student unions. A couple of years later, they've all got their first jobs who saw you. They've got a bit more money. You play the local town. He had a whole plan worked out. And God, bless him, he did it. He pulled it off. I never had that time. I never had that focus. And even when I had my breaks in America, and I've had a few, and they're all chronicled, I call them failing. Clive James wrote the famous book, Falling Towards England. I call my chapters on America, Failing Towards America. And I've had about 6 or 7 chances and blown them for various reasons, some good, some bad. But I never had the time to fully focus because I had 6 careers in Britain. I was a novelist. I was getting into musicals, theatre, my stand-up. So look, I'd have loved it. I'd have loved to be big in America, but I didn't really put the effort in, so I've only myself to blame. Whether I could get through now after the comments I've made about Trump, I don't know. I haven't been, that any more than anyone else has, but they seem to be getting pretty draconian.
I was going to say, because I mean, from this idea of cracking America, it was the big thing from as you say in the book, the Beatles in the 60s, maybe through to the noughties. It's probably not. It probably doesn't have the same luster that it used to have.
I definitely don't think it does, because you can, for instance, make it in America now without going. I mean, if you do have that TikTok thing, and amazingly, one of the few good things about the internet is while it hasn't created a democracy of ideas and liberalism, it's just been a sewer for extremism. Nonetheless, it has allowed other cultures to punch higher than you ever would have imagined. Nobody could have imagined Korean culture becoming so globally dominant, or Norwegian, Scandinois. Yeah. I mean, the money's still in America. They're all still following the money towards America, but the culture is coming from various places, unfortunately, because we're cursed with the common language. The only way we can sort of, get noticed is by playing on the royals and the empire and history and Downton and all of that. I mean, not always. I mean, clearly an example like The Office is the difference. The thing about comedy when I was big was there was no connection with America. I was the last generation that really had no chance over there, even if you went. America was not interested in British culture. It obviously the Beatles changed that for rock and roll in the early 60s, and from then on, British music was in. But in terms of comedy, there was just no interest. The Pythons, it took them about 10 years, but they were seen so niche. And again, a little bit of that Empire and Posh Boy thing. They kind of played into an idea of what Britain was, genius though they were, to some of the greatest comedy ever produced. But you know, the idea that me and Rowan and Rick would get picked up in America was no more likely than the two runners before us, or Eric and Ernie, or Tommy Trinder and Brucey. They were not interested in us. And I tell a story of when I did try and get on at the Comedy Store in LA when I was over there working with Henry Winkler. And I just sold out at Hammersmith Odeon. I had my own show on the TV.
Right.
In Britain. I'd hosted numerous American comedians on that show. I was arguably the biggest comic in Britain, certainly the biggest under 40. And I sort of tried to half say this. And the booker, I couldn't get through to the management. The booker said, "So you're big in England? Is that what you're saying?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to." "Yes, well, I guess you can say I'm big in England." He said, "Well, you know, we had a guy in last night who was big in Texas, and he was shit. So, you know, we don't do walk-ups." And that was the attitude. I mean, I sold... I mean, Hammersmith, I know nowadays they play arenas, but Hammersmith is 3,600. I did 7 sold-out nights. And the week later, I was in America trying to tell them that, and they wouldn't give me 5 minutes unpaid at the Comedy Store. That was the level of cultural divide in the 80s. Obviously, all that changed with the internet and the first of Johnny Depp living in France and getting into the Fast Show. And suddenly there was this new thing. And before you know it, British comedy was hip. You know, Russell Brand, obviously that's all gone a bit weird, but, you know, there was a time. And so, we were the last generation. Everybody tried it. Lenny tried it. Rick tried it with Drop Dead Fred, which was brilliant. But, you know, Lenny tried it with white guys or something. You know, he made a film. Rowan tried to open on Broadway. The only comic forces of my generation that had a toe in America were Rowan and Jennifer, and those were for very specific projects. Rowan with Mr. Bean. They love Mr. Bean, not as much as they do in the rest of the world, but they love it. But you know, as for Blackadder or anything else, they're not interested. And Jennifer, they loved Ab Fab, and that went international, but they again weren't interested in, you know, anything else, like for instance Honors, or pursuing it beyond that. You know, as I say, I have no regrets. The one thing I think you with the book is there's no regrets.
Oh God, no. This is it. It is success after success after success.
Frustrated by monumental fuck ups, but anyway.
Oh no, but even then, there are, you know, I think you have to be philosophical, you know. And you are philosophical. I just think, given what you've achieved, Ben, and continue to achieve, the books, the plays, the musical, the stand-up, the sitcoms, on and on and on. If you're going to talk about a Mount Rushmore of British comedy, I think with you, it's picking the other 3 guys to join you.
Well, that's very, very kind. Maybe we'll just have 4 different angles of me, all my good sides. I'll get the whole of Mount Rushmore of British comedy. Look, I've definitely had a charmed life. I fulfilled my ambition at the age of 21, which was to earn my living writing comedy. I wanted to be Alan Ayckbourn. I wanted to be Noel Coward. I wanted to be a comic playwright. By the time I'd gone to university, obviously telly was done. You know, I realized telly would probably be where I'd end up. I loved all the telly in the 70s and 80s. And I've been fulfilling my ambition as a comic writer ever since. And while there've been, you know, many a slip twixt cup and lip, etc., I certainly have made the most of my opportunities, messed up a few, and perhaps done even better with some than I would have expected.
For many, Blackadder, for a lot of people, it's not just the greatest comedy. For a lot of people, it is the greatest television program that has ever been made. To the point where, when kids are learning history, when I was a kid, they'd wheel out the massive television, and we all watched maybe the Rotten Boroughs episode, or it might be an episode of Blackadder Goes Forth. The cut through on that show, Ben, is maybe because you lived it, you don't even appreciate what the cut through is like. That show is just.
I'm aware that it entered the culture, and you know, obviously it was a community effort. All sitcoms are, particularly studio sitcoms. Anything good tends to be a community effort. I think it's ridiculous that they developed this habit in the late 80s of movie directors putting a so-and-so film at the front of their film. You know, nobody ever did that. Even Charlie Chaplin never said a Charlie Chaplin film. He put written and directed by Charlie Chaplin, which was his 2 jobs on the show.
True.
I mean, it's outrageous. Some bastard who hasn't even written the thing calls it a so-and-so film. And, well, they all do. And I find that really weird because it's a massive community of talent and craft that creates anything decent. I mean, Van Gogh could say a Van Gogh painting, but when you do anything in film or television, it's a village. It takes a village. And a village made the Blackadder. I'm very proud of my contribution. I certainly had a key moment, Blackadder 2, which was the change of everything, but which Richard and I, of course, did together. And I'm aware that it entered the culture, and you don't get many shows that actually become part of the real collective memory. So it's something I'll always be very happy to have been a part of, but I don't dwell on it personally because I'm no prouder of that than I am of Upstart Crow, my recent, or some of my failures like The Right Way or whatever. I've done everything to the best of my abilities, and I always thought everything I was doing was great at the time. Retrospectively, I might discover otherwise. But I don't think, I mean, I watch a Blackadder, and I don't think it's the greatest show ever made by any means. All I can see is the bits that got them fucked up, and most of that happened in the rehearsal with those bleeding actors. But let's not go there, because they were also very, very lovely, and I'm close friends with all of them. In fact, I went and saw Stephen in playing Lady Bracknell last night. So there you go. Now, I'm very lucky that, despite the fact that those were quite difficult shows to make, the Blackadder, there's no doubt about it, particularly for me and Richard, they produced a magnificent result, and they also produced some truly magnificent friendships, lifelong friendships. Although I was mates with Stephen and Hugh long before that. And
of course.
Yeah.
How close were you to that 5th season? You know, there was this mooted swinging 60s. Bald Rick would be called Bald Rick, the drummer.
I never thought that was much of an idea. Don't tell Richard I said, although who knows, you may watch it. It was never mooted. The thing with the Blackadder is somebody, normally Bald Rick, normally Tony, says, oh, yes, we all might talk about, you know, there's never been a mooted. The Blackadder starts with me and Richard. You know, as all the 3A series I did together, they start, you know, there'd have been no Blackadder 2, 3, or 4 if Richard and I hadn't written the script. Obviously, after that, you know, they have to be made. But frankly, only Rowan could genuinely be said to be you know, you could do it as long as you had Rowan. I mean, not saying you'd want to. Oh my God, the cast were just phenomenal. But the truth of the matter is, it starts with me and Richard, and then it knocks on to Rowan, and that's where Blackadder is, and John Lloyd, the producer. And we never talked about doing a 5th series. We never have. And my suspicion is we never will. I spent the most wonderful night with Richard just the other day. He did me the honor of interviewing me about my autobiography at the Cheltenham Book Festival. And it was a really wonderful night. I don't think Richard and I have ever sat on a platform together and talked for 90 minutes as we did about comedy and the Blackadder and all sorts. And a truly wonderful night. And it was 2 very, very old friends enjoying reminiscing. There was no eagerness on either of our parts to say, let's stop talking about it and go and do another. No.
But, so I mean, you know, if the Gallaghers can get back together and bring Oasis, you're not saying never, but I'm getting the vibe that
it's foolish to say never, because who knows anything about anything in life. But I honestly say, I would say cosmically unlikely, which is close to never. I always knew that Oasis would reform in some way. They've been sort of teasing away. I mean, you know, in the long run, the riches are so phenomenal that I think it would be very hard, particularly if you have no other, you know, nothing else to do. Your solo project's great, but eventually you kind of get a bit bored with not being as good as Oasis. And I think that it's a very honourable thing. And I mean, obviously Oasis came back and they were bigger than they'd ever been. And of course, what it turned out was, to everyone's surprise, just as with Take That's reunion about 10, 15 years ago, it turns out they'd come to represent a collective memory of youthful good times. And if you can be the act that people sort of coalesce all their school days, whatever, early adulthood into, like Take That did for millions of women who were born in certain years, and Oasis did really for a generation, a bit of a blokey generation, but plenty of women like it too. But, you know, no, Oasis would never have sold 6 Wembleys or whatever they did back in the day. They might have done 1. you know, but they come to represent the 90s memory of, hey, we had some fun, didn't we, back in our youth, and good on them. But we don't have that, you know, actually probably the paycheck on doing Blackadder, if you did a real negotiation, would be pretty considerable. It wouldn't be Oasis doing a stadium tour of the world, but it wouldn't be bad. But I have to say, neither Richard or I have ever done a gig once for the money. Fortunately, we never had to. I started making a living when I was young, and I've always made enough ever since. More than I expected, not as much as a lot of people think, but definitely well enough not to need to. So I never did adverts. I never did Police Academy 4, which I was offered. I've always done what I want to do, and I have no interest in writing another Blackadder, and I know Richard hasn't. I'd far rather, if we were to work together, that we did something else.
I think it's your favourite line that you ever wrote. Thin blue line. I've written this down. Here we go.
Best joke I ever wrote.
You know what's going on.
I do.
Your cock up, my arse. Right.
Well, you have to do the feed line. You have to.
Yeah,
it doesn't work if you don't do the feed. Otherwise it's just a very rude, as Rowan would say, gay sexual joke. Fowler was haranguing. Grimm was haranguing Fowler. Fowler, if you make a mistake, it's me that gets the blame. Your cock up, my ass. That's the joke. I can't believe on a comedy broadcast. Outrageous, James.
I'm so glad you provided context. The amount of people on a train right now spitting their tea out. I'm very grateful you provided the feed line. Now, please talk us through when a line comes along like that. How did that come about? Have you gone on a walk? Are you sat at the desk? When an iconic line like that comes along, please talk us through it.
Well, I've written an awful lot of jokes over the years, and I still have no idea how it's done. And Woody Allen spoke for every comic artist, and I think every artist. He said, when I write a joke, I'm hearing it for the first time. Now, that is an immensely astute way of basically summing up what creative inspiration is. It is, if you believe in God, God-given. It's an organic, natural moment when something happens, your subconscious something. You cannot plan a good joke. You cannot plan a beautiful. When Van Gogh decided to paint some sunflowers, he did not have a plan. He did not have an essay plan. He obviously just began to dab at the canvas. He had some ideas in his head, but he needed to do it in order for it to become what it was. And there is no question that any piece of comic writing has to be done in order to become. So if you are writing, or indeed any creative writing, if you're writing a novel or a stand-up routine, you must begin. You must begin. This whole image of writers with screwed up pieces of paper in the waste paper basket is, you'll never get beyond that waste paper basket if you're trying to write the perfect first line. You will never write the perfect first line. You may eventually arrive at it, having written many, and come back, having discovered what the piece is. You can then go and rewrite the beginning. And that's how you write a good story. And it's, in terms of comedy, you must get on a roll. Sometimes normally for me, I'm alone. I'm teasing my own imagination. My fingers are on the typewriter, and things are just happening, and I'm not thinking about it. You've got to let it flow. Sometimes it's with someone. I only ever did that really with Rick. I only ever actually, because Richard and I always worked separately and then combined our scripts. But with Rick, in the days when we had a sort of platonic love affair. We were so close. We loved each other's company so much, and we made each other laugh so much. There was a period when I knew exactly what would, and it's a thing. It's improvisation, improvisation onto the page or into the ether if you're conversing. Rick and Ade used to spend forever recording comedy cassettes. I never did that with Rick. Rick had two separate relationships, one with Ade, one with Rick, with me. I also have a beautiful relationship with Ade, so it's a lovely triangle. How did I write a joke like that? It simply came to me, and that's all I can say.
There's again this is all shameless fanboying, and I regret none of it, but The Man from Auntie, I just think what an iconic show, what a perfect show that was. And then the Ben Elton show off the back of that. Now there's a bit in the book that stopped me dead in my tracks. Ben Elton show is getting between 6 million and 8 million viewers. Now, bear in mind, we live in an age where if a show gets 2 million these days, it's deemed a hit, right?
Yeah.
How on earth did that show end with those sorts of numbers? Because even back then, that's a hit.
That show ended because I didn't do any more. But within 3 years, when I wanted to, times had changed. It's really funny. I talk about it in terms of Benny Hill's end, and it happened to me one day. There's something in the ether, and all through the 90s, I was the most fortunate, the most privileged. I mean, my God, I don't have any trouble checking my privilege. Believe me, I could get a show on the telly. I wrote a comedy drama based on Kind Hearts and Coronets, where one woman plays all 6 female characters. I called it Happy Families, and the BBC made it. God knows how much it cost. It wasn't bad, but I just wrote it and they made it. I wanted to do a stand-up show. BBC made Auntie, and then the Ben Elton show. The 90s, it was an extraordinary time for me. No wonder I irritated so many of my colleagues, because I'd have irritated me if I'd been looking. I mean, God, just, I was lucky, but obviously I was fulfilling that luck by producing, some reasonable stuff. And Man from Auntie, the Ben Elton show in 98 was a big hit. And I had Ronnie Corbett on, which was a dream come true for me. And it went incredibly well. And it was BBC Two's biggest comedy show of the year. And, I thought, well, I'll be back in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, like I'd always been. But when I came back, probably 201, 202, suddenly the boiler, I said to Peter Fincham, who was controller of BBC One, oh, can I come back? And I said, I'd love to do something like Saturday Live again, a lovely cabaret show, Saturday evening on BBC Two or whatever. And he said, oh, I think that would look terribly 1980s, don't you? I'll never forget it, actually. It was a really weird, I thought it was a weird thing to say, because I don't think comedy looks this or that. But what he was really saying, he's all right, Peter, I like him. But what he was really saying was, you're not hip anymore. And I wasn't. And I never even knew I was hip at the time. But clearly I wasn't cool, but I was hot. It sounds pathetic thing to say, but I've never been cool. I've always been farty, and I've never pretended I had that kind of strange ephemeral thing, which is being cool. But I was certainly hot in terms of I could get a gig anytime I wanted. And that moment had changed. And it was many, many years before I got to do stand-up again on the telly. In fact, it was kind of really it was the revival of Friday Night Live, which they should have made into a series. I would have loved it if they had. But anyway, so yeah, yes, times change. And The Man from Auntie was my last shot of being a hot stand-up comedian on the telly. And it happens to everyone. Even Eric and Ernie were fading. Before Eric died, they were already, they'd moved to ITV. I wasn't working so well. They were already, and it happens to everybody in the end.
That was the mistake. I mean, I love them, and there's a fantastic Graham McCann book, but they wanted to make the movie. I know why they moved to ITV, but that was a shame. Now, you talk about the comeback there, and I'm guessing it was purse strings as to why that show wasn't revived for the full season. There was, the BAFTA. It was a smash hit. It
was. We won a BAFTA, and everybody said this is the show we need now, just like in the 80s, because a comic with a bit of topical principle going on, and then bringing on all sorts of young acts. And I was by that time I was elder statesman, which gave it an extra sort of edge, that you got the old fella doing the links and a bit of this, that, and the other, and then you bring on all these mad, weird people from the new generation. And I thought it was a slam dunk. And I really believe that there's one thing terrestrial telly can do. It's live. We're seeing this with Strictly, and you can still do appointment TV. And I still believe that it was madness. Not the fact that I'd have been doing topical material. You come back from the pub the way people used to, watch it the night it's happening. I'd have been, God, if ever there was a time to bank, and I wouldn't be like those American hosts who, God bless them, but it's pretty sort of anodyne. It's almost like sort of Frank Sinatra does left-wing satire when you're watching these American hosts. They're great, but there's a sort of lack of passion and energy. Anyway, whatever. I don't like being critical of other artists, even when they're mega, mega famous. I would have loved to have done Saturday Live again, and I don't know why Channel 4 didn't. And they said it was money, but they seem to have money to make, naked car park attendants or whatever it is. Maybe that's a lot cheaper. Maybe if I offered to do it in the nude, I'd be.
Well, hang on a minute. What about this is not an expensive pitch. What about the return of The Man from Auntie?
Well, again, I honestly don't think there's a TV executive that would invest in a half. I can't even sell my stand-up concert videos. I mean, Channel 4, my last one, the 2019 one, it was beautiful comic video, I think, and everyone who's watched it seems to love it. Eventually, we got it on Channel 4 at cost, but they're not prepared. I just did a huge tour, Authentic Stupidity. Look, I'm not complaining. Jesus, please believe me. I'm just telling, because you're a professional website. You're like a trade website. You're in, I'll tell you how it is. And, no complaints. But the truth of the matter is, I have a concert video of my Authentic Stupidity tour. I played to at least 150,000 people across that tour. Amazing reviews, 4 and 5 stars. Not like me, but these days they seem to let me get away with it. It was all wonderful. And yet, even at cost, even giving it away, can't find a streamer or a national that wants to put on and it's just you're not. I don't know. I suppose no young executive thinks it's a feather in their cap to book an old git like me. I'm not going to hide behind the old straight white man thing. I mean, there's no doubt about it that quite rightly the opportunities are spread a lot wider than they used to be, and quite right too. So I'm not going to hide behind, nobody gives, old straight white men gigs anymore. It's just I'm old and not hot. I mean, I honestly, this isn't remotely me complaining, but and there's not a lot of opportunities on the main terrestrial. So I'm perfectly relaxed that Channel 4 decided to spend their money elsewhere, as the BBC. I think with streamers it's a bit weird because they're all crying out for content. Just stick it on. It doesn't cost anything. Just put it out there. But can't seem to find anyone who wants to. I think what you were talking about earlier, you were telling me to do it myself. I've got to start a YouTube channel or something. I've got to get with the kids. I've got to
more and more acts are putting their own specials out on YouTube,
And I think that's the way, because as I say, nobody wants to put it on one of the known streamers like, Netflix. There seem to be more. I think they just stopped doing stand-up because they overdid it so much that, frankly, Netflix was just wall to wall, very rich men making extremely successful specials, saying they're not allowed to say anything anymore for an hour while saying it on Netflix.
What about? I mean, I think the YouTube thing you might have answered, but what about Sky? Because they seem to be putting out more stand-up specials.
Yeah, people talk about Sky, and also apparently Channel 5 is big, and I think part of it is I'm not that hungry. I mean, I haven't been trying very hard, and I'd like to see the Authentic Stupidity tour concert video find somewhere, and I'm nothing else. I'm going to find a way, get some young person to put it up on YouTube or something. But I'm not, James, I'm really, it's not that the fire doesn't burn anymore. I'm still passionate about every aspect of my life, but I do think I'm less, I don't know about the word ambitious, because my ambition was only ever to express myself as loudly and as often as possible. But maybe there is a bit less of that. I mean, I don't have a gig lined up. I mean, I got 1 or 2 very lukewarm irons, kind of in the cooling embers of a dying fire. But I don't feel any stress or urgency to the fact that I don't know what I'll do next. And I've never been in that shape before. I mean, all my life, as sort of spinning plates and broken crockery as a theme throughout the book, I've always had 5 things that I need to get on with. My wife used to say, I've got to get on, which is something I always say, apparently. It should be written on my grave. Yeah, I'm dead, but I've got to get on. I just don't feel quite that sense of urgency anymore. So all those times interviews have said, have you mellowed, Ben? Do you feel mellowed? Maybe I have.
I think, you know what? I think I feel the fire on your behalf. I once interviewed Jimmy Greaves, and I used to love saying Greaves, and I kept, lovely guy, and a lot of love for him, and I kept saying about, it's such a great show, and eventually I said something like, I think I'm more bothered about all of this than you are, and he just went, I think you are, son. So maybe it's the same sort of thing. But
but don't forget, I am. I mean, I've just completed a 150-day stand-up tour. I mean, it only ended last May. That was a big thing. I had to write 2.5 hours of brand new material in a very different, changed world, and tour it for 150, wash your socks in a hotel sink days. So clearly the fire does still, but when my wife hears me talk like this, she says it's complete bullshit.
I'm with you. I'm with your wife.
You'll be back, fighting again. But what I'm really trying to say is nobody owes me a gig. Nobody owes me an opportunity. I have had many, many, many opportunities and much privilege. I think I fulfilled the faith people have put in me, but that doesn't mean I think I'm expecting them or they're necessary to put any more faith in me. I'll make my own jobs. I always have done. And, I'll find a way.
Well, one thing that sprung out from the book is, there are so many projects, and it's so exciting to read. It's such a page turner. But there's the show where Jennifer Saunders plays multiple characters. I think of there's the run of Silly Cow. I just wonder, is there a project that you felt at the time didn't get the love it should have got? Are you tempted to bring it out of storage, dust it down, maybe give it a 2025, 2026 reboot? Take something like Silly Cow, you rewrite that from the point of view of a blogger or a vlogger or something like that. Is there mileage? Because I think there are projects where you think, motherfucker, that should have been a fucking hit, and I know it. I just wonder if there's anything that you would bring back and think, you know what, slap it about a bit.
I don't think I ever would do that, because Dawn and I talked about doing Silly Cow as a little movie, and it just was very perfect as a play. And as you know from the book, it was a big hit in France, ran 7 months in Paris, and got rave reviews. It totally castigated here. I don't think I would ever dig out anything and rewrite it. I mean, I'm certain that as I said earlier, I think The Right Way was nothing like as bad as they said it was. Maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was, but I'd love to have seen that get a proper chance rather than just be killed at birth. But I'm not going to try and make it happen, because souffles don't rise twice. The one thing I think might be worth looking at it, I think the murder of Maybe Baby, my movie Maybe Baby, which was a very accessible and perfectly pleasant little rom-com on a very difficult subject, IVF. But at the time, I had a musical out with Andrew Lloyd Webber. I was about to do the Queen musical. I was on telly with the Ben Elton show. I had my novel at #1, and I just, obviously every knife was out. And that does make me sad, because it was a very beautiful project with Hugh Laurie as the star, and I had to fight to make him the star. Nobody thought he was a leading man in those days. They all know now. And that's a film, I don't know if you could remake it, but I think that it was actually something, because I've heard so many couples who've been through IVF refer to both the book Inconceivable and Maybe Baby the movie as something that really helped them, because it showed the funny side of it all, not embracing the sadness of being childless, recognizing that perhaps you don't have children, but that doesn't mean there's no less love in your life. It's just a different type of love, etc. It was a project which I think, had it been made by anyone other than me, would have been recognized for what it was, which was a really rather touching and diverting and funny movie about a really important subject. But, it was just been out and banging on. So, yeah, that one maybe I could, if ever I got a chance to make another movie, maybe I'd remake that. Although what I'd really like to do is just re-release the one we made. But that ain't going to happen.
I just wonder sometimes, is it a British mindset thing? So, say in sport, we love the underachiever, the person that didn't quite fulfill their potential. These are often the people that are championed. And the guys that are successful and win time after time after time, we love to bring them down. Some people love to bring them down a peg or two. Do you think there's an element of that sometimes, Ben?
Well, yeah, clearly. I mean, if you are ubiquitous as I was and just won't shut the fuck up, you're going to wind up a lot of people who think their voice should be being heard more. So, The Guardian has a lot of history of, giving my novels to other novelists to be reviewed or whatever. It's not, they're not going to love it. I mean, I understand that. I've experienced professional. I used to be jealous as hell of Stephen, my dear friend, but throughout the 80s and 90s, he couldn't seem to put a foot wrong, and I didn't seem to put a foot right. And I never, I mean, we're all human. We can all feel, I should have done that. I could have done that or whatever. And I understand that if you are as lucky as I've been and as energetic as I've been and as kind of confident and as happy in their own skin, in Britain particularly, I mean, we all know the difference. America has this culture of celebrating success, and Britain has this idea of being suspicious of success, because our culture comes from a world where the only good money was inherited. And there was a genuine suspicion. If you were a shopkeeper, there was no way you were getting into the London clubs, because you'd made your money, which was dirty. You had to have inherited your money. That's the culture we come from. Whereas American culture comes from bootstraps, like when people arrive in penniless. I mean, obviously, American culture leaves a lot to be desired, particularly at the moment. But in that aspect, the celebration of success, I think I would have found life easier. I mean, I always say, you know, I write another novel in England, and you know, it's always so you've churned out another novel. Do you ever get bored? I mean, what is it, 15, 16? You know, you go to America, and occasionally I've been interviewed in America. It's, oh my God, you know, that's so great, you know, and they've all been read, you know, so it's a different attitude. And I think I just don't know how to play the game. I mean, you might have heard me say this before, but again, bringing up Stephen, who I was only having dinner with last night, he knows how to do it. I think it's because it's natural self-effacing. So he does an interview. He's got a book out, and he'll go, "Oh, it's awful. Don't read it. I feel like an imposter. Don't you know it's nonsense? Did you please ignore it? I wish I hadn't mentioned it. You know." And that's Stephen. And then they'll ask me, and I go, "Oh, it's the best thing I've ever written. I'm so pleased with it. It's brilliant. You've got to read it." And of course that annoys people, but I just can't help it. I'm Mickey Rooney, you know, let's do the show right here. But I'm genuinely, the enthusiasm is genuine. I wouldn't have written it if I didn't think it was great. And the same goes for all the people who pretend they're all self-effacing about it.
You're curating your fantasy comedy gig. Do you, I mean, I'm intrigued here. Do you have any pre-gig rituals, Ben?
No. I am, and funnily enough, you're actually talking about something I feel very strongly about. I worship the Enlightenment, the age of Enlightenment, the fact that the world managed to emerge, well, the Western world emerged from a period of medieval superstition, the dark ages of ignorance and suspicion, of evidence-based, and come the Enlightenment, suddenly argument is everything. You have to be able to prove your point. You have to be able to argue it, empirical evidence. And now we are re-entering an age, a dark ages of superstition, where people are literally decrying evidence-based arguments as somehow cheating. No, what I feel is what matters. You know, I do my own research. Oh, fucking do you? So I personally am the enemy of all superstitions. If you've got a chain letter, send it to me. I'll burn it for you. My wife is a bit naughtier than me. She'll still sort of spit over her shoulder and won't let me put, I don't know what it is, new shoes on the bed or a hat on the bed. I don't know what it is. I'm still working it out. But I hate all that. And I don't believe in superstitions. I don't believe in ghosts. And I think, I mean, I'm no more certain about the mysteries of the universe than you are. But I also do believe in evidence. And you know, if there were ghosts, they wouldn't all be Victorian children in little nighties. So, you know, so I have no rituals, and I will help anybody to get over a ritual. My son, I remember we realized he was kind of turning around twice when he went through doors and things. He started to get into this thing, and, you know, it's worrying. I think rituals on the whole always lead to bad things. So no, I have no rituals. But what I do like to do is walk to a gig. I always try and get a hotel that's near enough for me to walk there. I like to sort of scout out the town a bit, find a Tesco Express or a Sainsbury's, buy a little bit of salad, maybe a treat. Maybe there's a Greg's. I really like the Belgian buns with the thick white icing and the cherry. I love a Greg's Belgian bun. And because I try not to drink after gigs anymore because I love to drink too much. So you have to be careful. And so I'll buy myself a treat and, you know, to have at the hotel later. And so that's my pre-gig ritual. Try and find a Greg's to buy a Belgian bun or something.
That's great. Now, who would compare the gig, Ben?
All right. Well, look, I'm not a big stand-up comedy is that much a part of my life. I mean, it's that much a part of my legend, but my life is about writing, sitting at home. So, you know, you could ask me, you know, what would be my favorite novelist dinner party or whatever. But this is obviously a kind of stand-up based site. And of course, you know, I recognize I am a stand-up, but I'm quite a specific one in that I'm only do my own material. I'm only interested in performing in my own work. I would never for a second want to perform an act that had been written for me. So no matter how good it was, even if it was better than anything I'd ever written, because that's not why I'm on stage. I'm there to stand in my truth. But having said that, I loved light entertainment most of all when I was young. In the 70s, I consumed all of it. Sitcom was my favorite, but I also watched variety and into the 80s. And I also love the history of comedy, and I love to watch old YouTube clips. So for the MC, I'd love to have a really brilliant traditional old school MC. I never saw Tommy Trinder work, of course. I mean, he was gone, I think, before I was born, or nearly. But maybe Tommy Trinder or Bruce or Max Miller or Brucey, who I did see work and I did know a bit. And he was a great, you know, I'm in charge. He was a great MC, could control the house, good nature. So yeah, I'd have a trad guy. I'd have, you know, somebody like Tommy Trinder or Bruce Forsyth, probably, if we're not going too far into the. I mean, I know he could be naff and cheesy, but that's a great part of variety and entertainment. Being naff and cheesy. I mean, oh, cuddly toy, don't forget to cuddle. I used to love it, the Gen game. And I mean, actually, I thought Larry Grayson was even better, but I think Brucey would be a better compare. So I'll go with a traditional British stand-up compare.
There's a look that Bruce used to do. I mean, I still do it now. You know,
he could be exasperated with people, and he was the king of the catchphrase. I mean, "I'm in charge" is a great compare catchphrase. It really is. You know, a lot better than "shut the fuck up," which is what our generation used as a compare catchphrase. So yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is random. I'm not a slavish fan of Brucey, but I'm curating a gig. Let's get a compere who knows how to run a house.
I think that's great. That's a fantastic pick. Who would open?
Well, now I'm going in. There's various choices. I'm going to open with a piece of heartbreaking nostalgia and a 20 minutes of comedy that's central to my life. I'm going to open with Rick. Rick used to and obviously he would probably close the bill, you know, but he's going to open for me because when Rick went on stage in a comic strip comedy store back in the early days, and even when I was touring with him a couple of years later, and the house would not stop laughing for 5 minutes, and he still wouldn't have said a word apart from maybe what is it, and it was electric. It was made. Rick in his youth, I mean, his career and his life took a number of turns, and they weren't all happy ones. And I talk about it a lot in the book because I was with him through a lot of it and regretted a lot of it. But Rick in his golden years, sort of when I first met him at uni, 77 to end of the young ones, 84, was unstoppable as a comic force. And he was like Flashheart, but on stage, it was that fabulous. And he had this character of the sort of furiously farty, committed socialist lefty poet or whatever. Well, I put the lefty bit in. Anyway, so I'd open with Rick's opening 20 minutes when he read his poems. Got a couple of poems, if you'll listen. You know, I mean, just amazing. So that would be the opening. Should probably be the closer. But, oh, my God, everyone's going to have to follow that. So let's see who's going to.
Do you not think, I mean, I still think about this to this day. If Britain had a better movie industry in place, you know, because in America, if you think of, you know, the likes of, you know, Bill Murray, Adam Sandler, Mike Myers, on and on and on, they have the big hit with SNL, and then that leads to a movie career.
Yeah,
I know
certainly that would have helped. I mean, I remember David Putnam decrying that, you know, there are no British comedy movies, and I thought, blimey, you know, you made Chariots of Fire. Nobody's rung us. No, literally, we never got an approach from anybody to make a movie throughout the entire 80s. No one. But then the British film industry has always been kind of weirdly fractured. I'm not sure Rick could have handled it. We had a couple of chances on telly and he blew it. I talk about it quite funnily in the book, but it was quite painful. I mean, Rick was always going to be more of a Belushi than a Adam Sanders. You know, Rick was wild in many ways, lovely and beautiful, but, you know, the booze was a thing. Never any drugs or anything, but the booze is a big enough drug if you drink enough of it. And he was beautiful, but I'm not sure how well he would have, whether it would have worked that way. Rick needed writers, and he needed me and aid, and for various reasons, you know, we all had a great time together, but we never really in my opinion, Rick never fulfilled his full promise. I mean, he did as a young man, but we needed to see what next. He was a bit of a Hancock, but I think even less longevity.
Beautifully put. I mean, you know, obviously the iconic Blackadder performances, but we're talking 2 episodes, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the absolute classic moments of Rick, there's not that many. I mean, he did some good. I mean, New Statesman was fun, you know, but you know, in terms of Rick being the most powerful comic force in the room, there's not that many moments. But the promise they show is extraordinary, and I was looking forward to a lot longer period of enabling that promise by providing material and character and depth. And for various reasons, which I talk about in the book, our professional relationship became a lot less easy. We remained close friends all our lives, but professionally, we never probably worked together again, and it's something I'll always regret.
Who in the middle?
Well, I'm going to give the longest slot to my what I think is the greatest British stand-up. I mean, I never saw the the old guys. I'd love to have seen Dan Leno, but in terms of post-war, well, in the post-70s, Billy Connolly, for me, the greatest British stand-up. I never saw him live except at benefits and things like that, doing a tight 20 or something or 10. But I watched his videos, and I think he was the master storyteller, and his utter good spirit and good humor and love of humanity and true love of the madness of being human. That's what's great about a lot of British comedy, which the Americans don't do so much, which is to celebrate inadequacy. That's why P.G. Wodehouse is the greatest of all comic writers, because he celebrated the glorious inadequacy of human being. We're all small. We're all bedeviled with doubt and vanity. And none of us are what we wish we would be, including, the Trumps. That's why they become what they are, because they don't recognize their own inadequacy, and they're constantly trying to. Well, they do recognize maybe, and when they're asleep at night, as Bob Dylan said, even the president of the United States sometimes must have to stand naked, and that would be an unpleasant sight. But Billy was an utterly human comedian, blessed with a astonishing comic ability to time and tell a story. And I was so lucky because one time he had accepted some award, and he spent some of his acceptance speech talking about me. Yeah. I just got a big slag in for Filthy Rich and Catflap, and he talked about me, and I was obviously stunned. And I wrote him a letter thanking him, and I said, I think you're our greatest ever stand-up. And ever since then, he's occasionally corresponded, even now when he's very ill. And only very recently, I just got a little random text saying, I'm just scrolling through my phone, and it's what he said. He said, and I saw your name and it made me smile. Keep making strangers laugh. And that was it. He just sent me that out of the blue. So Billy Connolly, one of the true greats of British entertainment, and a great humanist, and I think the greatest stand-up of my lifetime. So I'm giving him a very long set so he can meander and go off piste and come back, and maybe even play a little bit of banjo.
Now, the talk about pressure following Brucey, Rick Mail, Billy Connolly. Who would close the gig, Ben?
I'm going to put Morecambe and Wise on at the top of the bill, just because they meant so much to me as a teenager. I instinctively, and I always was a great defender of Ernie, because I knew that they were a double. Even as a boy, I could tell that Eric's special genius, which clearly was comedically by far the greater of but it needed. They understood it too. They understood their symbiotic relationship. So Eric and Ernie. I mean, I don't think to be honest, they wouldn't take the gig, because they had one stage act. They trotted it out for 40 years. They never really did anything else. It famously was recorded at Croydon Fairfield. It's not that great to our modern eyes, etc. And they're not going to follow Rick and Billy. They'd say, we're not coming back from the grave to do that. But I'm putting them there because in my mind, that final routine would be just the best of Eric and Ernie. I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to do the Liszt's violin concerto or whatever, the Andre Previn sketch, which if you watch in its entirety, it's much longer than the clips that you normally see, is, I think, as great a sketch as has ever been done. And Andre Previn, his contribution is astonishing as the straight man. There's two straight men in a way. Well, Ernie's never a straight man, but you know what I mean. So, but just because I loved them so much, and they were part of my dawning love of comedy entertainment on the television. In fact, they were the main reason for it. I'm putting Morecambe and Wise at the top of the bill, even though, frankly, it probably wouldn't work these days.
I'm so grateful you said that about Ernie Wise as well. In Graham McCann's book, he sort of comes up with an equation, a mathematical equation as to why Ernie Wise is so important. Any football fans listening, the centre forward gets the plaudits for scoring the goals, but it's the box-to-box midfielder that's putting the graft in. And Ernie Wise was the greatest.
It always annoyed me. You see sort of clever arts critics talking about, he's the Ernie Wise of the situation. And fuck all about entertainment because you're a snob. No, Eric and Ernie. And I got to meet Ernie, and it was lovely. And he even mentioned me in his autobiography, which was saying, as many of the old guard said, I was surprised at how nice he was. You know, they always expected me to say, fuck off, I'm a punk comedian. Ronnie Barker certainly did. But
Jesus Christ.
The book.
The Ronnie I remember I've got my earbuds in, I'm getting my youngest's daughter's bike out of the shed, and that Barker bit, that stopped me dead in my tracks. I mean, fucking hell.
Well, we made up in the end, so let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. He could be a little self-important, but hey, he was a very great man. Now,
has there been an incident that you would somehow love to replicate at this gig, Ben?
This is there's very few. My stand-up is almost, it's like a one-person play. It isn't. It's not stand-up in a traditional sense. It's all about me delivering a series of comic ideas together. So there's very few incidents. I stopped doing mixed bills in about 1982. I mean, Rick and I were touring together by 83, briefly with Andy de la Tour, but then just me and Rick, and then it was just me. So I only had about a year and a half of being on a circuit vaguely. You know, I'd turn up, there'd be half a dozen other acts, and I was comparing the Comedy Store, so I was obviously involved with other acts. So I don't really have that kind of world of experience that the many comedians who work now have. But from my early days, I do have one memory, and I'd love to. Well, I have lots of memories, but one I've always carried with me as something that I hope might still happen on this vast circuit of comedy we now have. But I was at the Comedy Store in my very early days before I took over as compere. Tony Allen, who liked to be called the Governor, was a sort of an anarchic comedian, great man, big, handsome man, but very much. And he would always freeform. He loved it. And in those days, there was this ridiculous idea of comic integrity, that somehow there was more integrity and more honesty in going on stage and busking it and making it up as you went along than preparing an act before you went on stage and delivering it and making people laugh. I've never understood it. I didn't understand it then. This idea that somehow it was kind of selling out to be professional. I didn't understand why making it up on the page, which is what I would do, was any less, honest than making it up on stage, which is what Tony did with considerably less success. Although occasionally he had a good. Anyway, Tony was always on at me to free my mind and free form. I'd come off. He said, "You did the same act you did last night." I said, "No, I changed a couple of lines." "Yeah, but basically, you got to free form. You got to come." This was how it was in those days. And he knew, and also he hated that. So he was always on at me to freeform. And one time, I don't know why, I'd done an audition that day, and I'd got for an advert, and I'd walked in when I was very young. I'd nothing against doing them. I just didn't need the money after I made it. And I walked in, there was a big poster in this huge office block. There were pictures in the foyer of what the street had looked like before they knocked it down to build this office block. And I just started riffing on the comic thing of we destroyed the street, but we've still got pictures of it, so that's okay, sort of thing. And it went huge. And I bust for a full 10 minutes. I genuinely just bust and riffed, and it was an amazing moment. I came on stage. Tony and I had always had problems politically because he was an anarchist, whatever that meant. And I was a Labour Party member, which made me worryingly right-wing as far as most of them were. And like they used to think Callaghan was a Tory till Thatcher turned up and showed them what a real fucking Tory looked like. Anyway, Tony was always hated the fact that I was in the Labour Party. So I come off stage and I've done this freeforming, and Tony said, "That was beautiful, man. You freeformed." I went, yeah, Tony, I really did. He said, you explored the parameters of your imagination without constraint. You built no walls. Tony, I really did. He said, "You freeformed and freed your mind." I said, "Yes, Tony, I did." He said, "Good. Now apply that to your fucking politics." And that took place in the wings of the Comedy Store in 1981. And I wonder whether that sort of conversation still happens. I don't know. It was a very loose, almost hippie ethic time, and there was more room for that kind of debate in the wings.
Now, has there been an incident that must not happen at this gig, Ben?
I don't like hecklers. I very rarely get them. And if I get one, I do my best to shut them up as quickly as possible, because I have an act. I have a work of art, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And it's delicate, and it's based on a lot of ideas being threaded together. And somebody's shouting out. Often, I know I don't get many heckles, but sometimes I get shouts, and they tend to be enthusiastic. "Oh, Ben, or double seat or something." But none of it's any good. I don't do audience participation. I know that some comics do. They thrive on it, working the crowd work. And apparently they put it on video, and that shows them who they are. And good, all power to them. but I'm on there to deliver a pre-prepared set of ideas. I'll reinvent it every night, of course, and it'll be sometimes a bit new, and I've got to re-explore the arguments and find my truth again. But it's what I've got to say, and people have paid to hear what I've got to say. They have not paid to hear me put down a heckler, and I will, and I'll get a few laughs, but it's a horrible experience. It ruins my flow, and it spoils the community of the imagination. The truth is, I take a very arrogant view on stage. People have paid to see me. They haven't paid to see some Wally at the back who decides he wants to be heard. And so, no, I hate hecklers. I mean, there is a world of comedy where hecklers play a part, but that's not my gigs. And anybody who knows anything about me knows that. So if you want to come to one of my gigs, engage your imagination and close your mouth unless you're laughing.
I mean, I'll say that Always Be Comedy is just not, it's not a thing. I mean, I remember one incident probably about 10 years ago. That's how infrequently it happens. And a person heckled something, and the whole crowd, to their eternal credit, turned around as if to say, "What are you doing?" You know, I mean, thankfully, I think it's a thing that you know, hopefully died in the 80s or 90s. Now, the final question is, how do you unwind after a gig, Ben?
Well, these days I'm an old man, so it's not that big a problem. I go to bed most. I mean, in the early, you know, for years, Rick and I would get drunk after gigs. I mean, through the 80s, we loved it. We never drank before shows, but we'd always have 3 or 4 pints minimum, you know, and then have maybe a couple of whiskey chasers, and then go and walk around the town and climb up a lamppost or something. I mean, you know, we were young and we were excited, and it was lovely to drink after gigs, and for a long time after gigs, because I do love the grape and the grain. I can't deny it. I'm a lifelong evangelist, and I'll never give it up. But I've realised you can't do it every night, and so I no longer drink after gigs, except if I've got friends in or whatever. So I'll go home, back to the hotel. I won't go home. I'll go back to the hotel, get my little. I mentioned it. I'll maybe get my little Greg's treat, or maybe I've got myself a cream cake from the chill section at Tesco's Extra. And I might watch a bit of, you know, look at the paper, might watch a bit of telly and have my treat, and try not to carry a drink up from the bar. It's not that big a fight, because I always feel good the next day. I've done a night without it, you know. My wife and I, we have a thing. We call it alcohol-free days, right? So did you have an AFD? Yeah, I had an AFD. Yeah, I did too. So we try and add them up over the year and try and do more than half the year, right? We keep them in the diary. I was in Germany working on We Will Rock You last week, a German production in Stuttgart. They offered me a drink, and I went, "Oh no, I'm AFD."
AFD.
And AFD, of course, is Alternative for Deutschland, which is their Farage even to the right.
Oh, no!
Party. So I just out of it. So no, I'm AFD today. Everyone just, because I mean those initials are as much as NF used to be for us in the 70s, National Front. Anyway, so yeah, it's very boring. After a gig, I go and I chill in my hotel. And I look forward to that time. I have a sandwich, a little treat, and I go to sleep after about an hour and a half. But, you know, back in the day, we'd always be in a hotel bar till 3 a.m, ordering toasties, and some poor old bugger trying to make them. Yeah, but those days are gone. Ben,
I'm going to say something that I'm sure you hear it every single day, but thank you for your time today. But thank you for everything that you've done, and you know, I couldn't be more grateful. And this book has been just pure joy, and I know that if anyone is yet to discover it, is yet to read it, yet to do the audiobook, you are in for a treat. So well done, Ben. You must. I hope you're really proud of this book.
I'm very proud of it. It's been the happiest writing experience of my life. Again, sounds rather self-serving, but I've never once taken time to consider myself through my whole life. I've never questioned my motives, never interrogated my successes or my failures. I've always organically moved on to the next thing that's inspiring me. I never think about myself. I'm not a retrospective person, never sought therapy. And this book has been the very first time I stopped and considered, what have I done? And I really enjoyed writing it. I think I did learn something about myself. I think Sophie would agree with that. And funnily enough, I actually enjoyed reading it when I did the audiobook. Sounds terribly full of myself. I enjoyed reading my own story, but I did, because so much of it is news to me, because I really only thought this shit just now, even though what I'm thinking about happened 40 years ago. And interrogating, as we would say, unpacking, you know, my relationship with Rick, my relationship with Queen, what you know, the decision to work with Lloyd Webber, with the shit that it got me, but how much friendship and inspiration ensued. You know, so many interesting things that at the time, I copped the flack and moved on, I've gone back and looked at. So yeah, I am very proud of it. And the fact that people are enjoying it, and the friends who are in it, who are not uncritically served. I mean, there's edge to it. I mean, I'm the biggest target, as I always am, but all the friends who are in it have read it and loved it. And that meant a lot, yeah. So yeah, I am proud of it. And I hope people read it. So I hope everybody on your set will go on, because if you want to know about a life in comedy, then I think you probably, enjoy this book.
I've got to ask this. Have you ever seen Nish Kumar live?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I
Ben,
don't go and see stand-ups. I never have.
If you ever get the chance to see Nish Kumar live, I think your heart would swell.
Oh, all right. Okay.
I thought that a few times while reading the book, in terms of...
You think we're kindred spirits?
I really do.
Oh,
and
okay.
in terms of, you are, and I say this as a huge compliment, you're what I would call you're a front foot stand-up, right? And Nick, you know what I mean by that. And Nish Kumar is the same. When he performs, there is this wonderful, this glorious fire, and it's authentic, and it's something that you've always had. If you ever get the chance, if he comes, near your way, I think you would.
I tend to avoid stand-ups because all stand-ups cover relatively similar material, because they talk about being human, and so I'm fearful of being kind of, in a way, influenced by the attitude of another comic. And I know I can't write that because I heard Nish say that. And even though I've thought of it myself, it kind of looks a bit like I got it from it. So I've always avoided stand-ups. But maybe since I've known, I certainly won't be touring for at least a couple of years, and maybe never again. I mean, I'm 66. I think I will, but I don't know, maybe not. So yeah, all right, I'll go and I'll seek out Nish. Nish.
Ben, I tell me I'm wrong, but I think you're one of these guys, as you're saying the Tesco Express buying the bun, I think stand-up ideas will be they're coming to you all the time, aren't they?
I hope so, but they really only coalesce when I sit down and write it. I mean, you only get to work directly off inspiration when you're very young. Those first few ideas sort of almost seem to leap fully formed, like the first episode of The Young Ones. As you get older, you have to work harder at it. There is something about the young imagination which is peculiarly fertile. And it's not that you lose that, but it's just because that joy of the first moments of discovering I can do this. It's like, apparently, I love Woodhouse. He talks about golfing stories, and that everybody who hits a golf ball, the first time you hit it, because you're not even expecting anything, you kind of hit it pretty well. And then you'll spend the rest of your life trying to recapture the ease and devil-may-care attitude you had the first time you took a swing. And I think that could be answered. We could also go for creative inspiration. It does get harder, but on the other hand, it kind of gets more satisfying as well, I think.
There's a Woodhouse line. He's describing that a clumsy policeman, and the line is something like about how clumsy he is. He could endeavour to cross the vast Kalahari, and he'd still manage to knock something over. I mean,
Woodhouse, beyond. I'm a member of the society. Me and Stephen, of course. Yeah, wow. Yeah. The Woodhouse Appreciation Society. There's a lot of people in it. Yeah.
Well, Ben, I know full well that I'm in the Ben Elton Appreciation Society. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on your brilliant site. And I shall one day come to the club and maybe do, as Lenny Henry would put, stand up and throw down. So
yes,
now we're talking. That to do.
All right, Ben. Thanks I'll hold you to that. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. I hope
Bless
you.
Cheers, Ben, sir.
All
thanks,
the best.
Ben. Huge and heartfelt thanks to Ben Elton. Tim, that might have been the fastest 90 minutes of my life. It went with the click of the fingers.
Yeah, it was as you've just heard. He can just talk and talk, and it's fascinating. He's really, obviously, if you've ever seen any of his stand up, his tours are often 2.5 hours long. He can really go, and he was fantastic.
Also, I assume he kept it in the chat, even at the chat at the top with Ben. He's obviously got this voracious thirst, obviously for life, but this thirst for knowledge. So that even the chat about videos and so on social media, even that was fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting seeing someone who was such a big part of stand-up and still is, but like adapting to the new rules of comedy, which include you have to put up all your stuff all the time, always for free.
It's true, isn't it? We were chatting with Rachel Fairburn about this last night.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachel did an amazing thing where she essentially clipped up, as far as I can tell, an entire 20-minute Always Be Comedy set over a course of about 12 reels. It's an amazing thing.
And also, 20 comedians listening, it does work, doesn't it?
Oh, I mean, yeah, look, Paul Smith is performing in the biggest arenas in the country. Vittorio, Mike Rice, the gang, they're performing in huge places and their audiences absolutely go for it.
Yeah, it is fascinating. The gear has to be compelling. That's true as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, of course. It can't just be any single thought you've had on stage. I have
Trust me on that.
slight I don't know what this is, possibly too snobbish an opinion. I almost think if you're a new act, maybe don't post any videos for the first 2 or 3 years of your gig going. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, because remember that chat with Rachel Galvo?
You know what? Yeah, immediately. That's a good argument. Yeah, fair point.
No, but then hang on, we could do a whole podcast on this back and forth. But then you don't want to be on stage thinking like, you're right, I suppose. You don't want on stage thinking, Rachel is unique, I suppose, because she's absolutely roofing it. But maybe thinking, if I was to put myself in that situation, I wouldn't want to be on stage thinking, I wish I had a minimum of 3. If I was a brand new act and I had some reels go viral and was then selling out venues, I wouldn't want to be stood on stage thinking, I wish I had 3, 4, maybe even 10 years under my belt.
God, I hadn't even considered that. Yeah,
Who's an act? Mike Rice is one, I suppose, where when they broke through, Josh Pugh's another actually. Who the acts where they broke through with the reels and so on, but they already had the hard yards under their belt. They'd done it again, I sound like a snob. They'd done it the right way, in as much as that they were good to go. They had the skills to pay the bills.
Well, maybe the ultimate example, or certainly one of them, Jeff Innocent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And look, Paul Smith had been doing comedy for a long old time. Well, hang on. It's only he had had a very decent career up until then, but then it went properly bonko.
The Paul Smith story. He's become. I've never met Paul. He's become a real hero of the podcast in recent weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But do you think if Paul was American, they'd have made like a Rocky Balboa-esque movie about his life? I mean, because what he's done it's insane, isn't it? It's incredible.
It's absolutely astonishing. Yeah. It's very, very inspiring stuff.
To the comedians who listen, I think we can say this: have fun with it. And who was it who said you've just got to put the stuff out there? You know what? It might have come from that book, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. That's one of the things from that. You've sort of just got to put it out there, and if it, don't worry about it not doing that well. If it does well, great. If it doesn't, don't beat yourself up. At least you gave it a go.
Yeah. Oh God, absolutely. Yeah. You got to give it a go and see what happens.
Sorry, I really did go full Oprah there. Right, Tim, hang on. Your favourite Ben Elton memory?
Oh God, of course, yes. Am I allowed to do that sort of cop out where I'm going just for fact that he did the podcast? Because
that is not a cop out.
Because that is it. I remember, as a child, going into central London and walking past like the Dominion Theatre, and there's that gigantic Freddie Mercury statue. At the moment, it's a giant red stiletto because it's Devil Wears Prada, but that huge Freddie Mercury outside of Dominion Theatre, and that's a Ben Elton project. That's We Will Rock You, one of the biggest musicals off its era. So I think the fact that this guy who I guess, look, when you see, I don't think I expected to be part of an interview or with a big musicals guy when I was a child. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean that is I didn't realise, until I read the book, I didn't know that my wife knew. I was chatting with my wife. Poor wife, I've been talking through every page of this book. But my wife did know that We Will Rock You took a kicking when it came out, and then word of mouth got, the public saved it really. So I don't think I realised. I knew it was a hit. I didn't realise the extent of the global mega hit that it was. Yeah, good choice, Tim. I'm gonna go for Ben Elton's Invisible Demon routine from The Man from Auntie. Now, I cannot, Ben, if you're listening and we talk, if we're going to clip some stuff up, please get Invisible Demon out there. Invisible Demon is one of those routines. I know a lot of you are like this. When a routine stays with you, for example, if you're ever on a train and you want to get the double seat, Ben Elton's double seat routine, you probably immediately comes to mind. Every time you want to get something out of a drawer, say some instructions or some batteries, you might think of Ben Elton's man drawer routine. These are the iconic routines that live in our head rent free in the best way possible. Tim, which obvious ones am I missing there?
We said Ben Elton's man drawer routine, obviously McIntyre's.
Sorry, Michael McIntyre's man drawer.
Just before any comments. Obviously Mickey Flanagan's Out is as iconic as it really gets.
Hang on, there are so many more, aren't there?
There are so many more. A lot of them will be like personal ones to you or like your family or something. Some of it just stick out. So like, for example, McIntyre has a bit about when you get a plane ticket and you get on the plane and you put it in like the front pocket. And for whatever reason, that just has stuck with me ever since I saw it. And I probably last saw it about 10 years ago.
Every time I get on a plane, which not very frequently, I hasten to add, anytime I get on a plane and they show you to your seat, it's the McIntyre routine of, yes, I managed to leave the house, get to the airport on my, I am quite capable of finding seat D3 or whatever,
Yeah.
That's another one. Sean Walsh going upstairs on a bus and seeing if there's a spare seat. That I can't get on the top floor of a bus without thinking of that. Have you seen that routine?
It's so good.
Widdicombe's entire, you can't go to a wedding now without thinking of Widdicombe's entire wedding routine, which is so good. Anyway, Ben Elton did this routine on Man from Auntie called Invisible Demon, and it's about things like when you're walking down a street and there's someone walking towards you and you try get out of each other's way, but you're sort of mirroring each other's movements and you often end up almost walking into them. And he says it's almost like an invisible demon is doing ruining this for you. And then one of them is when you might be at a girlfriend's house and you've done a poo. I'm sorry, you've done a poo, and you keep flushing it, and it's like an invisible demon is holding onto the poo and not letting it go down the U-bend. And then you can hear your girlfriend's mother saying something like, "Is Benji ill?" Yeah, so mine would have to be Invisible Demon. But I mean, look, I was spoilt for choice when it comes to Ben Elton. Very, very grateful, guys. Thanks for all the shares, and we imagine Ben Elton is one that will be getting, the bejesus shared out of it, and for that we're very grateful. Big thanks once again to Ben Elton. We could not be more grateful. Obviously, we love all of our guests, and we're grateful for every single guest. But obviously, when it's a guest who has been a very warm and constant presence throughout your entire comedy adoring life, obviously it's going to hit differently, isn't it? So thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks to all of you. We will see you at a show soon. Also, Tim, we've got to say, if you're new to the podcast, check out the back catalogue.
Oh, yeah. There's hundreds and hundreds of episodes at this stage. If you include the comedy heroes and bonuses, there are over 200 episodes at this stage. There's hours and hours and hours that probably amounts to weeks and maybe even months of content, forgive me. But there's a lot of stuff to get into.
And you can watch you can watch quite a bit on our relatively new YouTube channel as well. Across the socials, we're at Always Be Comedy. If you're new to the pod, previous episodes, check out the likes of, say, Ed Gamble, Harry Hill, Rachel Parris, Rose Matafeo, James Acaster, the aforementioned Widdicombe and Walsh, and many, many more. Stephen Merchant, Ramesh Rangada, anyway, Nish Kumar, on and on and on. It's an absolute treasure trove. Tim, thank you for everything as always. We'll see you all soon. Thanks a lot, guys. God bless us all. Bye, 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 bye.